Geneva Global is an international philanthropic professional services company that works with high-end wealthy individuals, corporates, and some big foundations. And what we do fundamentally is we connect local projects, brilliant local projects that we find around the world with those clients. Geneva Global has been working for 15 years, 100 different countries, $200 million of granting. And over the time, we've obviously started to sort of perfect the way that we do due diligence and work with local community-based organizations, which is our preference. We think you get a better philanthropic bang for the buck. But fundamentally, what we've learned is unless you actually bring them together and concentrate local organizations, you don't get more than the sum of the parts. So you can, and we did, prior to 2006, we actually funded lots of different organizations all over the developing world. And they were all good organizations, and it would be the same as with impact investment. You provide investments to all those different good companies, but essentially that's all you get. And what our interest is focusing on social transformation in a given place with a population of maybe 50 to 200,000 people. And we're looking at pilot sites in northern Uganda and in Mexico, and really focusing that energy so that you create a virtuous cycle of education, health, economic development, economic empowerment activities all happening at the same time. So you potentially get to a tipping point and see real sustainable long-term social change. A good example is India and Nepal. So there we're working an anti-trafficking program. It's all granting at the moment, but essentially it's tracking there's two main trafficking routes, road and rail, out of Nepal into northern India. And we're funding 28 different community-based organizations all the way down those trafficking routes, from prevention in Nepal itself to rescue and rehabilitation and trying to catch the traffickers when they're actually trafficking women and children, to halfway houses, to actually getting those families reunited or providing vocational training when they can't go back to the families. And all these different organizations all play a different part, and they're all learning to actually work together. They've created their own network, a cross-border network of collaboration. And before we started bringing this community of practice together, some of the Indian and Nepali organizations hadn't even ever spoken to each other, and the leaders hadn't even met. Yeah, I don't think collaboration comes easy. I think it's probably, finally at the last resort we will collaborate rather than it coming easily. And I think it's just as true for a not-for-profit as it is for a for-profit enterprise who is essentially competing with people doing, offering products and services of a similar nature. So the issue that we've learned that is the key is to figure out the incentives. If you can incentivize organizations so that the opportunities coming from the collaboration are greater than the sense of losing out from a competitive nature, then you actually get people working together. So in a granting situation, what we do a lot is we bring together this community of practice who meet every 3 months. They really start working like a team. They're the ones that create the overall strategic vision and hypothesis of the overall change. And they'll do so because what's on offer is 3 years worth of funding. Maybe if it was only 2 years of funding, or certainly if it was only 1 year of funding, I don't think we'd see the same behavior. Well, in the not-for-profit world, then certainly our experience has been that the first year possibly people are feeling somewhat forced, and it's maybe not natural, and people are getting used to the idea. But in years 2 and 3, there's real relationships that bond, and people are starting to actually refer to each other. They're sending people to each other. They're asking for each other's help, and typically what we find is outside of our program. So in this India-Nepal example, they've created their own formal network of India-Nepal organizations working together, and then they've started advocacy campaigns to regional educational regional authorities in order to actually move forward the anti-trafficking agenda. And they are going to carry that on. They're very clear. They're going to carry that on, whether or not we're funding. So we also saw in Ecuador child-based legislation come about because the organizations organized themselves separate to the program in order to actually get legislation change. So yeah, I mean, once I think people really start to actually build relationships of trust, then typically, these, especially for community-based organizations where they're there the whole of the time, they're not going anywhere, they actually last and they become, permanent and sustainable benefits to the program. The fact that we've seen sustainability fundamentally as a green issue, but it's becoming much more of a societal, as well as a financial return, societal return, as well as a environmental return, and a real feeling now that those three things are coming together for an awful lot of large corporates, and a real sense that with the massive sort of wealth transfer that's going to go into the hands of millennials going forward, and the different worldview that they have from the baby boomers that currently are sort of holding those financial purse strings, then I think we're going to see an expectation that good business is sustainable business. And it may take us some 20 years or so, but fundamentally the idea of, even the idea of sustainable impact investment may actually seem an anachronism in 25 years' time, because that's the way that all good business is done. So, certainly I'd love to hope so. I mean, obviously these are all massive and gross generalizations, but I think that something fundamentally is different around the millennials versus the baby boomers. And I think you can see the evidence of that in terms of lots of millennials that are in their job interviews and in their professional careers looking for meaning and looking for value, and the fact that earning a good salary, doing whatever it is that they're doing, isn't enough anymore. And I think there's ample evidence that what we're seeing is a new value set coming into society, and as the financial power transfers from one generation to another, we're not going to see it overnight, but I think the norm is going to start shifting along that continuum towards an expectation of sustainability, value to society, caring about the planet, as starting to be the normal way of expectation of behaving, rather than where we were, which started off with CSR reports that were a little bit lip service and basically we're sort of papering over the cracks. And I don't think we're there now. I think we've moved a long way from that, but that's where we started.